Imagine a man that you wouldn't look at twice. He's the guy standing behind you in the grocery store. He's the neighbor who waves at you while he's fixing his fence. In the small Slovenian village of Dolenja Vas, that man was Metod Trobec. He was a farmer. A good, simple man, the locals said. But there was a peculiar habit Metod had. Every few months, usually on a Tuesday or Wednesday, a thick, greasy smoke would start pouring out of his chimney. It didn't look like wood smoke. It was heavy. It clung to the laundry hanging on the neighbor's lines. It had a smell that was sweet. Almost like roasting meat, but with a chemical edge that made your throat itch. If you asked him, Metod would just wipe his brow and tell you he was baking a big batch of bread for the week. And you'd believe him. Because why wouldn't you? Well, today, we're going to find out what happened when the oven cooled down. Welcome to Well of Monsters. Metod had a type. He didn't go for the young or the flashy. He went for the women who felt like the world had forgotten them. Lonely hearts, widows, women with sad eyes and empty bank accounts. He spent his days lingering around the Ljubljana railway station, a place of transit, where people are always between two worlds. He'd offer a cigarette, a kind word, and a soft-spoken invitation.
I have a quiet farm in the hills of Dolenja Vas. It's peaceful. Come have some tea. Let's talk about a new start.
To these women, Metod wasn't a predator. He was an exit strategy. A way out of their loneliness. One of them was Vidka. She was tired of the city noise, tired of being a ghost in her own life. She followed him to his car, feeling a sense of relief she hadn't felt in years. But as they left the city limits, the relief began to sour into something else. They drove south, towards the lower Carniola region. The flat landscape of the city began to buckle into rolling, dark hills covered in dense pine forests. The village of Dolenja Vas is small, but Metod's farm was even smaller, tucked away at the very edge of the settlement where the gravel road turns into mud and the trees seem to lean in closer to the path. Metod didn't play the radio. He just hummed to himself, a low, rhythmic sound that matched the vibration of the engine. The only other sound was the gravel crunching under the tires and the occasional scrape of a low-hanging branch against the roof. When they finally arrived at the farm, the air was different. It was colder here. The house was a modest, two-story stone building, weathered by years of mountain winters. To the left stood the barn, and just behind the house, the massive stone bread oven, a relic of an older time. It looked cozy at first glance. There was a faint light in the window and the smell of dry wood in the air. Metod helped her out of the car, his hand lingering just a bit too long on her arm. He led her inside, the wooden floorboards groaning under their weight. The kitchen was warm. The oven was already preheating, radiating a dry, intense heat that hit Vita's face like a physical blow. Metod took her coat, his movements slow and deliberate. He offered her a seat at the heavy oak table, then leaned in close, so close she could smell the tobacco on his breath. He whispered,
You don't have to worry about anyone finding you here. In Dolenja Vas, the hills keep their secrets.
She thought he was being sweet. She realized too late that the sanctuary was actually a cage, and the quiet farmer was simply waiting for the fire to reach the right temperature. Inside the house, the silence was different. It wasn't the peaceful silence of the countryside, it was a heavy, industrial quiet. Metod began to move with a strange, mechanical efficiency. He would lock the front door, then the back, his heavy boots clunking on the floorboards like a countdown. Vidka sat at that oak table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had gone cold. She noticed the windows. They weren't just shut, they were reinforced. And then, there was the smell. It was faint at first, a lingering, sweet scent that seemed to be baked into the very walls of the kitchen. When she finally gathered the courage to ask when they were going to eat, Metod didn't answer. He just stood by the stove, staring into the flames, his reflection dancing in the dark glass of the window. He looked older, sharper. The kind farmer was gone. In his place was a man who looked like he was listening to a conversation only he could hear.
The oven needs more wood,
he finally whispered, not to her, but to the room. Vidka's eyes wandered to a sack of potatoes in the corner of the room. Near the sack was a woman's colorful purse, vibrant, expensive, and completely out of place in a dusty farmhouse. Beside it, a single earring. She recognized the style. It was popular in the city, the kind of thing a woman would wear for a special occasion, for a new start. In that second, the air in the room seemed to freeze. Vidka looked at Metod, and for the first time, she saw his eyes. They weren't the eyes of a lonely bachelor. They were flat, like two pieces of slate devoid of any human heat. He saw her looking at the purse. He slowly wiped his hands on his apron and took a step toward her.
You have such a beautiful soul,
he said, his voice devoid of emotion.
It would be a shame to let any of it go to waste.
Outside, the wind picked up, howling through the pine trees of Dolenja Vas. In the yard, the stone oven began to roar, the fire inside growing hungry. Vidka realized then that she wasn't a guest. She was the next batch. And in this isolated corner of Slovenia, no one was coming to check on the farmer's guest. For years, Metod Trobec was a ghost. He lived in the gaps of society. He killed 5 times, Vidka, Marijana, Uršula, Anna, and Zorka. 5 women who vanished into the smoke of Dolenja Vas. The police had files on them, but they were missing persons, not murder victims. There were no bodies, so there was no crime. But monsters often trip over their own shadows. In 1979, Metod made a mistake that had nothing to do with his dark ritual. He was a thief. He couldn't help himself. He started stealing small things from neighbors, tools, a bicycle, scrap metal. It was a petty crime, a nuisance that finally brought the local police to his gate. When the 2 officers arrived, they expected to find a cranky farmer with a garage full of stolen junk. Metod was calm, almost bored. He led them through the house, showing them his honestly earned possessions. He was so confident in his purification by fire that he didn't even think to hide the yard. As they walked past the massive bread oven, one of the officers, a man who had spent his life around wood fires, stopped. He looked at the ash pile. It was too large. Too white. And it had a strange, calcified texture. He bent down, poking the gray mound with a stick. He expected to find charcoal. Instead, he found a small, curved piece of porcelain. He picked it up, wiped away the soot, and his blood went cold. It wasn't porcelain. It was the remains of a human hip bone that the fire had failed to fully consume. Metod stood behind them, his face a mask of stone. He watched them uncover his graveyard, one fragment at a time. He was sentenced to death, but the law changed, and his sentence was commuted to 20 years. He spent those years in the Dob Correctional Facility, the largest prison in Slovenia. He was a model prisoner, quiet, unremarkable, exactly as he had been in the village. It's as if he had simply moved his farm into a concrete box. But there is a specific image that lingers in the minds of those who followed the case, cell number 10. If you look at the photos of his living quarters, you don't see the lair of a monster. You see a room that is disturbingly normal. A neatly made bed, a small wooden desk, and a window with bars that looks out over the gray Slovenian sky. It was here, in this cramped, silent space, that Metod lived with the memories of the smoke. People wondered if he ever felt remorse. But Metod never talked. He just stared at the walls of cell 10, a man who had erased 5 lives and was now slowly being erased himself by the passage of time. In 2006, Metod decided he had waited long enough. He was found in that very cell, slumped over. He had taken his own life, choosing his own exit strategy, just as he had once offered one to Vidka and the others. He left no note. No apologies. Just an empty bed and a legacy of ash. Today, the farm in Dolenja Vas is a ghost. The neighbors still talk about the farmer of death, and they say that even decades later, the grass near where the oven once stood grows a different shade of green, thick and dark, fed by a history no one wants to remember. If this journey into the heart of Slovenia's darkest hills stayed with you, leave a comment below. What do you think went through Metod's mind in that silent cell? Don't forget to subscribe to the Well of Monsters for more deep dives into the shadows. Until next time, take care, and see you at the bottom of the well.